We're on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, about 5-6 lines from the top of the Amud. This is the sugyas which are discussing the halachas of matzah. With which matzah you yaitze the mitzvah. This blot we learned yesterday, today. In the next few blot here discusses all the details of the halachas of matzah. Tana Rabbana, Yachol yaitze adam yidei chivasei b'ma'aser sheni b'Yerushalayim. I would think that you could be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with Ma'aser Sheni that's in Yerushalayim. In the Mishnah it said, if you have Ma'aser Sheni that's not in Yerushalayim, so you're not allowed to eat it outside Yerushalayim, and you eat it from matzah, you're not yaitze the mitzvah. You're not allowed to eat it there. But now the question is, how about if it's in Yerushalayim, where you're supposed to eat your Ma'aser Sheni? So I would think you would be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Talmud Laima, the pasuk says, lechem ayni, the poor man's bread, but we darshan from this that as if it was written with ayni with an aleph. Mi shenechal ba'aninus. You only yaitze your mitzvah of matzah if it's made of a dough that could be eaten even by a person that's an einan, meaning Rahman al-Islam, someone that a relative passed away before the kvura, that day. Yatzazeh she'ein nechal ba'aninus. Whereas Ma'aser Sheni cannot be eaten by an einan, ela b'simcha. It could only be eaten in a time of where it could be b'simcha. As Rashi brings the pasuk, it says by Ma'aser Sheni, lo yachalti ba'oini mimeno. You're not allowed to eat it as an einan. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says, matzos riba. The Torah writes the term matzos more than once to be marbet, to say that you yaitze with Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Imkei mat tamad loima lechem ayni. What does Rabbi Akiva learn out from what it says lechem ayni? Prat liisa shenilusha biyayin v'shemen udvash. You're not yaitze the mitzvah of matzah if it was baked with wine, honey, or oil. As we learned this before, this is what's called matzah ashira. Because it's not poor man's bread, it's not lechem ayni, it's matzah ashira, so you're not yaitze the mitzvah. That's what Rabbi Akiva darshans from lechem ayni. My time at Rabbi Akiva, now the Gemara explains the differences of their opinion, why each one darshaned different from the other regarding these two words of lechem ayni. So what's the reason of Rabbi Akiva? Miksiv lechem oyni. Does it say in the pasuk lechem oyni with a vav? It's not spelled in the Torah with a vav. So therefore we're not going to darshan it as oyni with an aleph. Read oyni, meaning that a person that's not allowed to eat what he's eating as an oynan is not allowed to eat it. Oniksiv. The Torah says it without a vav, so we read it as oni. And therefore it has to be poor man's bread, not baked with yayin, shemen, or dvash. Rabbi Yossi Aglili disagrees, and he says, Mi karinan ani? Do we read it as ani? Aini karinan. Even though it doesn't say it with a vav, but the kri, the way we read it, is aini. And therefore, we can darshan that it means lechem aini, only bread that could be eaten as an ainan, not the Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, hi the karinan be aini. The fact that it says in the Torah, without a vav, but we still read it aini. What do we learn from that? Kiddush Shmuel, we learn out what Shmuel said. Dama Shmuel, lechem aini. What does lechem aini mean? Lechem she'ainin olav dvarim harbe. That this is bread that you say in it dvarim harbe, which refers to saying in it the Haggadah. Actually, Rashi over here says, this is a famous Rashi. Rashi says the meaning of dvarim harbe means the Haggadah. If you look in Rashi, goymer and malav es halal v'omer and malav Haggadah. That you say the halal and the Haggadah. So Rashi is telling you that the halal is also part of the dvarim harbe that has to be said on the matzah. So this is the reason why when we say the Haggadah, what do? We uncover the matzah. Oimrim olav. You have to uncover the matzah to say it on the matzah.
The halal is only later.
So there's two halves of halal. The first half of halal we say it together with the Haggadah. So that's what the half of halal that Rashi is talking about. The second half of halal is a different inyan. It's connected to the gula asida. First half of halal is where you say b'tzeis Yisrael and Mitzrayim. That's connected to the Haggadah. And the second half you say later. It doesn't have to be said on the matzah. Yeah, so it's our minig today is to say the Haggadah not only in the matzah, but we have the kaira in front of us the entire time when you say the Haggadah. The Alter Rebbe brings in a Shulchan Aruch. The reason why the kaira is brought before is not only that the children should have questions and so on, but there's an inyan to say the Haggadah on all of the minim that you're going to be becoming the mitzvah later. The matzah, the charaisis, the marer, and everything that we're going to be using in the Seder. Also, that's okay, that's when you get to the Zman Achiyuv. Yeah, okay. V'sava Rabbi Akiva, frek the Gemara. Does Rabbi Akiva hold Isa shenilusha b'yayin v'shemen dvash loy, that a matzah that's baked with wine, honey, or milk, or wine, honey, and oil, that it can't be loy, that you can't use it for the mitzvah of matzah. But we learned in another braise that halach is not so. What does it say in the braise? Ein loshen isha isa bePesach. You're not allowed to bake or knead a dough on Pesach v'yayin shemen dvash with wine, oil, or honey. V'im losh, if you did, Rabbi Gamliel leimet isarev. Rabbi Gamliel says you have to burn it miyad, immediately. The reason is, Rashi here says, we're talking about it was baked or it was kneaded only with no water. This is Rashi's opinion in this Gemara, just with wine, oil, or honey. And Rabbi Gamliel says that it has to be burnt right away because it becomes chametz very quickly. So you can't keep it. So you have to burn it right away. Now this is Rashi's opinion. Other Rishonim disagree with Rashi and say that it does not become quickly chametz if it was baked or kneaded only with these things, only if it was mixed together with water. If there's water together with yayin, shemen, and dvash, then it becomes chametz very quickly. So Rashi holds that it becomes chametz even if there's no water, and the only difference between this case and dough that's kneaded with water is whether you chayiv kares or not. If it's made with water, you chayiv kares. If it's made with any other kind of juices, oil or honey, you're not chayiv kares. But it does actually become chametz even quicker. Mashenk and other Rishonim say, if it's made with any kind of juices, anything other than water, it does not become chametz at all. It will only become chametz if there's a little bit of water mixed in, and when there's a little bit of water mixed in, it actually becomes chametz quicker. We don't paskin like Rashi. We paskin like all other Rishonim. That the pshat over here of this braise is talking about yayin, shemen, and dvash together with some water as well. And it's even a mashahu of water. Even a mashu of water together with the yayin, shemen, and dvash, it will become chametz even quicker. The chachamim say, yoichal, you could eat it. In other words, it's true it becomes chametz quicker, but it's possible to bake it right away, and you can be careful it shouldn't become chametz, and you could eat it. And then Rabbi Akiva said, Shabbasi hoisa eitzel Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua. I spent Yontif, Pesach, by Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, velashti lahem, and I needed for them, isa b'yayin shemen advash, a dough with wine, oil, or honey. They didn't make any comment about this. So he's saying that I see that you are allowed to make it with yayin shemen advash. Now the Braisa says, va'afal pi she'ein loshen, even if you're not allowed to knead it with wine, oil, or honey, mekatfim ba. You could spread it on top of the dough. So the Gemara explains this last statement here in the Braisa, osan la Tanakama. This is explaining according to the Tanakama. The Tanakama said that it's not allowed to be kneaded with wine, oil, or honey, still saying you're allowed to spread it on top of the dough. Then the Braisa goes weiter. Another opinion, the Chachamim say, es shaloshem bay, mekatfim bay. What you're allowed to knead it with, which is water, you're allowed to spread on top of it as well. Ves she'ein loshem bay, if you're not allowed to knead it with it, water, it's not water, if it's wine, oil, honey, you're not allowed to knead with it, ein mekatfim bay, you're not allowed to spread it on top either. V'shavin, everybody agrees, she'ein loshen es ha'isha b'poishrin, that you're not allowed to knead the dough made to be matzah with warm water, because warm water could become chametz much quicker than cold water. That's the whole concept of mayim shalana, which we were learning about also. So, what's the Gemara's question? What did Rabbi Akiva say over here? Rabbi Akiva said that he said he was by Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and he did it. He made the matzah together with yayin, shemen, and dvash, and it's not a problem. Before, Rabbi Akiva is the one that said, lechem oini, that it has to be dafka lechem oni, poor man's bread, not to be made with yayin, shemen, and dvash. Answers the Gemara, it's not a question, b'chlal. Like kashya, b'yom tev rishayin. Before, Rabbi Akiva was talking about yom tev rishayin, meaning for the mitzvah of matzah, the night by the Seder, to be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. There, it can't be made with other ingredients besides water and flour. And b'yom tev sheni. And over here, we're talking about the last day of yom tev, or really the entire Pesach. B'chlal, matzah on Pesach, according to Rabbi Akiva, you can make it with other ingredients besides water, and it's not a problem. It's not for the mitzvah of matzah. It's b'chlal using matzah or anything that's baked, Pesachdik, the entire Pesach, it can be made with any other ingredients as well. So the Rishonim explain, seems to be a very simple answer. The Rabbeinu David over here says that the Gemara actually thought in the beginning that when Rabbi Akiva learned out lechem oini, that he was speaking about all 7 days of Pesach. It's not only regarding the mitzvah of matzah. In other words, in the second braise, it's clear that he was talking about the entire Pesach. The Havaman of the Gemara was that the first braise, when he said lechem oini, he was referring to all 7 days of Pesach, that it has to be dafkin made only with water, not any other ingredients. So the Gemara answers no. He was saying that only regarding the mitzvah of matzah, but regarding the entire Pesach, you can use whatever you want. This from this braisa, you see mentioned before the halacha that we paskin that if it's just juice with no water whatsoever, it will not make it chametz. And therefore, when it comes to our minig, the Alter Rebbe's chumrah, that we're very careful with, not to eat gebroks, that it's even baked matzah should not get mixed with any water whatsoever. But theoretically, if it gets mixed with any other juice, which is no remnants of water in it whatsoever, there's no issue. So if you want to put your avocado on matzah or anything else, even mitzad this minig, there shouldn't be any issue. But the problem though is, if there's a mashuhu of water that's mixed into any other juice or any other liquid, so that mashu, not only will it make it chametz, it'll make it even quicker chametz. As I mentioned before, that's what the Braisa was talking about over here, according to most Rishonim. It's talking about these juices together with a mashu of water. Just a mashu of water will make, so therefore, even if you're using avocado, whatever it is, you're going to have to be very, very careful that it should be, the knife using, it should be 100% dry. So some people are makbid, some people are not, but this is the mucker of this Indian over here. Sagt der Gemara weiter. We're middle of an Indian over here. Second, I'm holding over here. Okay, yes, the Gemara made a difference if it's the mitzvah, the first night of Yontif, and the rest of Yontif. Rabbi Yeshua lebnei, like Rabbi Yeshua said to his children, Yom Mekama, the first day of Yontif, when you're using the matzah for the mitzvah, lo talushli b'chalba, don't make it with milk. Mekam ve'elech, the rest of Yontif, lushli b'chalba, you could bake the matzah, put into the ingredients even milk. Fragt the Gemara, wait a minute. Milk is an issue b'chlal. V'hatanya ein loshen es isa b'chalav. You're never allowed to knead any dough with milk. Vim losh, and if you did, kol hapas asura. Then the bread or the matzah would be aser. Why? Because you might come to eat this bread or this matzah together with something that's meat. Ella, answers the Gemara, hachikama. What he told him is as follows. And that wasn't milk. The matzah used on the first night should not be made with honey. The rest of Pesach, you can make it with honey. Or you can say, but really he was talking about milk. What did Ravina say? There is a heter to make a dough, a challah, bread with milk. Ke'en tura, if it's made like an ox, shari, then it's allowed. Hachanami ke'en tura. If it's made ka'ayin tura, if it's made like an ox, it's allowed. Ka'ayin tura. There's actually a machlekes rishonim what the pshat of ka'ayin tura means. Rashi over here says ka'ayin tura means the size. If it's made like the size of the eye of an ox, meaning it has to be made small. If you have a little roll that you're making, so you make it and then you don't leave it around, you'll have it right there and you'll remember, you'll eat it right away, you're not going to eat it with meat. But if you make a larger loaf and then you're going to have it left over, you might come to eat it with meat. Other Rishonim say ke'en tura means that it's made in a certain shape. If it's made in an interesting shape, you make your challah in the shape of an ox, you make it in an interesting shape, you'll remember that it's milachix. Or today, for example, if you have a cheese Danish and you can see the cheese sticking out, so it's certainly not an issue because you know that it's cheese. So both shittas are brought in Shulchan Aruch, that as long as it's made something, either it's made very small, or it's made in an interesting shape that you know that it's made with milk, then it's allowed. Vishavin, another thing it said in the Braisa we quoted before, that everybody agrees, she'ein loshen esa isa.
Tura is a cow.
Huh? Tura is a cow? Yeah, okay. Say that.
Cow gives milk.
Yeah, okay.
She says,
okay. Vishavin she'ein loshen esa isa bepaishin. Everybody agrees that you don't need the dough with warm water. Why is this different by the menachos that are brought as a carbon in the mizbeach, which also have to be made not to become chametz? Then the Tanan over there, the Mishnah says, Kol ha-menachos nilusha is bepaishrin. They are allowed to be made to be kneaded with warm water. U'mishamran shelo yachmetzu, and you have to just be careful with it that it shouldn't become chametz. So why by matzah are we not allowed to use warm water? Answers the Gemara, im amru bezrizin, if it was said about the zrizin, the kainim of the Beis HaMikdash that are zrizin, they're diligent and they're careful that shouldn't become chametzik, yaimru b'she'ein zrizin. Should we say the same thing regarding chametz and matzah, regarding every person that to allow him to bake it with warm water and it's going to become chametzik? Fragt the Gemara, so if you're making this distinction, ihachi milses nami losses, when it comes to the dough that's used to the flour that is, or maybe even the kernels that are used for the menachos in the Beis HaMikdash, you should be allowed to soak it in water. So he said, chitin shel menachos, the wheat, the kernels of the wheat that are used for the carbon mincha, ein loisus and oisa, you're not allowed to soak it in water. So what do you see from here? What's the concern if you're going to soak it in water? Then later it might become chametzik. When you grind it, you make a flour out of it, it might become chametzik. Unless you're very careful with it. You have to dry it properly, and then you make a flour out of it that shouldn't be in contact with any fluid that was left over from when you soaked it. So you see that you don't rely on the kayanim that are careful to make it in a way that it shouldn't become chametzik. So why when it comes with warm water, we rely on the kayanim. When it comes to soaking it in water, we don't. Answers the Gemara, this is a very different, this is a very simple difference. Lisha bezrizin. The kneading of the dough is made by zrizin, by the kayanim. Isa, that's done with the zrizin. L'sisa, less of zrizin. The soaking of the kernels of the wheat, that's not made by the kayanim. A yid that brings his carbon mincha, he brings the flour as a carbon mincha, which means that it was done already before. He soaked it before he brought it to the Beis HaMikdash b'chlal. Frag the Gemara, wait a minute, if you're saying that it's only because it's made by the Kayanim, Velisha mi isa bezrizin, is it the Kayanim themselves that are the ones that knead the dough of the carbon mincha? Vaksiv, the pasuk says, V'yatzak ala Hashem, and you pour oil on it. Ven ve'avia la kayin, you bring it to the kayin. So from this pasuk you learn out, mikmitza ve'elech, mitzvahs kahuna. The whole mitzvah that has to be done only by a kayin is only from the kmitza, when you take off that part for the mizbeach. Limit al yitzike or blile, the pouring of the oil and the mixing it, shekshere b'chalodam. Anybody can do it. So the same thing with the kneading. If you're kneading it and making it into a dough by the carbon mincha, that's not done by the kainim. How can you say that there's reason and therefore can be done with warm water? And says the Gemara, Lisha, when it comes to the kneading, nihide bizrizin lesa, true it wasn't done through the kainim that are zrizin, but b'makim zrizin isa. It was done in the azara and the Beis HaMikdash where the kainim are there. And the kainim teach whoever is doing it to be careful, because it's done in a klisharis, so it has to be done in the azara. The hamamar, belila ksheire bizar, the blila, the mixing of it, could be done by azar, but chutz l'chaimis azar psula. But outside of the walls of the azar, it can't be done. La fuki l'sisa, whereas when it comes to soaking the kernels of the wheat in water, the ena bizrizin, it's not done by the kayin, and v'lei b'makim zrizin, and it's not done in the azara at all. So therefore, there's no kayin to be present to teach the person, to show him to be careful with it. Frag the Gemara, what's the difference from what we learned by the mincha of the omer, which was barley that was brought on the second day of Pesach? The Tanya over there, it says in the Braisa, mincha sa'omer loisus and oisa. You're allowed to soak the kernels of the barley in water, and then vitzoivir and oisa, and then you pile it, meaning you allow it to dry, and only after it dries, then you make the flour out of it, and it won't become chametzik because you've let it dry. So why over here are you even allowed also to soak it? And it says the Gemara tzibur shani. The mincha sa'omer is not a carbon of a yachid that's bringing a mincha. It's a carbon tzibur. A carbon tzibur was done by a shliach of a bezdin, and he knew exactly what he was doing, and he was very, very careful with everything that he did from the cutting of the barley. It was all done by the bezdin, all the details, and therefore over there we know that he's going to be careful with it. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in the Braisa. I would think a person could be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with bikurim. This is of course referring to a kayin that eats the bikurim. So I would think that he could use the wheat that he got for bikurim for matzah. Talmud loima b'chol meshvesechem toichlu matzais. What do I learn out from this? Matzah hanachelas b'chol meshvesechem. Only matzah that's allowed to be eaten in any of your dwellings. It could be used for matzah. Yatsu bikurim she'ena chala b'chol meshvesechem. This excludes bikurim that's not allowed to be eaten anywhere else. Ela b'Yerushalayim. Bikurim is only allowed to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Divrei Rav Yossi Aglili. This is Rav Yossi Aglili's opinion. Rav Akiva says, I have a different source for the fact that it can't be made from bikurim. He agrees to what Rav Yossi Aglili holds, but he has a different source. Matzah u'marer. The Torah says together, al matzah semereirim yechlu, we compare matzah to marer. Ma marer she'ene bikurim, just like marer is made from things that are growing. The bitter herbs are made from vegetables, not from plants, and not from anything of the shiva saminim that's bikurim. Af matzah she'ene bikurim. So too matzah has to be made from something that's not bikurim. So therefore it can't be made from Bikurim. Wait a minute, if you're going to say that we're comparing matzah to mara, that it can't be made from Bikurim, if so, go further and say, just like mara is not from any of the minim of the Shivas HaMinim, af matzah she'ein b'mina Bikurim, maybe the matzah has to also be made from something that is not, the min cannot be part of the Shivas HaMinim from Bikurim, which means, oitzi chitn v'sayren, I'll exclude and say that wheat and barley sheyesh b'minam bikurim that are part of the shivas aminim and can be bikurim, I should say that you can't make matzah from chitim and sayrim, and you'll have to make matzah and marer only from the other three minim, from spelt or rye or oats. So could that be according to Rabbi Akiva? Says the Gemara, Talmud loymar matzos riba. There is a riboy. The Torah writes the lashon of matzos a few times to tell me that you could make it from chitim and sayrim. As to the Gemara, matzis riba. So if you're having this riboy to say that you can make it even from chitim and sa'irim, afilu bikurim nami. So I should also say that you can make it from what's bikurim itself for the kayin. Says the Gemara, Hadebe Rabbi Akiva. You're right, Rabbi Akiva had charata. He retracted from this comparison that he said that we compare matzah to mara. And the Gemara brings a braise where we see that Rabbi Akiva had charata from this. The Tanya, we learned in the braise. It doesn't here say who the man the Amma of this braise is, but the Gemara will soon show us that the one speaking in this braise is Rabbi Akiva. Yachol, I would think that a kayan could be yaitza the mitzvah of matzah with bikurim. Talmud loim bevachol moish v'seichem teichlo matzahs. So the drasha that was brought before in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the braise brings here, that only a matzah that could be eaten in any of your dwellings. Teichlo matzahs. Matzah nechelas b'chol meishaves, yatzi bikurim she'ein nechelas b'chol meishaves. So excluding matzah of bikurim that cannot be eaten in all of your dwellings. Elab Yerushalayim and only Yerushalayim. Yachol shani maitzi af ma'aser sheni. So now the Braisa continues and says, with this same drasha, shouldn't I also exclude ma'aser sheni, which the Gemara spoke about before, right? In the beginning of the Gemara that we learned today, it spoke about excluding ma'aser sheni, and there the Gemara brought that according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, we excluded from lechem oini. But now the Gemara is saying, what do I need the drasha of lechem oini for? I can learn that from right over here, that it's ma'aser sheni can't be eaten anywhere other than Yerushalayim. So I would think that I'm Maitzi Ma'aser Sheni as well. Talmud loima matzos riba. No, for that I say that because the Torah writes matzos, I'm marbe, I include even Ma'aser Sheni. But the Gemara the Braisa asks right away, Umar isa l'rabis Ma'aser Sheni. Why are you marbe and include Ma'aser Sheni or lohoitzi bikurim and you exclude bikurim? Answers the Braisa, marbe ani Ma'aser Sheni. I'm including Ma'aser Sheni. Sheyesh lo hete b'chol meishaves. There is a case when it would be permitted to eat it outside Yerushalayim. How is that? Even after you brought your Ma'aser Sheni into Yerushalayim, you could eat it outside Yerushalayim. Could Rabbi Eliezer, like Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, or like Rabbi Lazar's opinion? What does Rabbi Lazar say? Gemara is going to bring it in a moment. But I exclude bikurim she'ein lehem heta b'chol meishavis. Once the bikurim are brought to the kayin, to the Beis Hamikdash, it cannot be eaten outside Yerushalayim. Now, when could Ma'aser Sheni be eaten outside Yerushalayim? The Amar Rabbi Lazar, Minai ila Ma'aser Sheni shenitma shepoide noisai afilu b'Yerushalayim. Ma'aser Sheni that became tamei, even after it was brought into Yerushalayim, you could redeem it and then eat it outside Yerushalayim. So this is a chiddush because usually Ma'aser Sheni, once it's brought into Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to redeem it anymore. You must eat the Ma'aser Sheni there. You could only redeem your Ma'aser Sheni and bring money instead to Yerushalayim if you redeemed it outside Yerushalayim. But Rabbi Lazar disagrees. Rabbi Lazar says even after it was brought into Yerushalayim, if it became tamei, you're allowed to redeem it even in Yerushalayim. What's the source? Talmud loymar kiloi suchal se'esai. So the simple meaning of this pasuk is that you can't carry all your produce to Yerushalayim, so you redeem it outside Yerushalayim. But Rabbi Lazar says, ve'ein se'es ela achila. When it says leisuchal se'es, it doesn't mean you couldn't carry it. It means even when it's in Yerushalayim and you couldn't eat it because it became tamei. Shenema, we see in the pasuk where it says, vayisa mases me'es ponov, that Yosef gave his brothers food to bring to Eretz Yisrael. So what does he bring? Give them mases. Mases means food. So I see that it means to eat. So the same thing over here. Ma'aser Sheni that became tamei in Yerushalayim, and that's what it means when it says kilei suchal se'esai, that you can't eat it in Yerushalayim, so you could redeem it. Atkan. So here we see the Braisa makes a distinction between bikurim and Ma'aser Sheni. So now the Gemara says, this is Rabbi Akiva. Man shamet le da'ama b'maisa sheni nafik bey. Who's the one that says that you yaitze the mitzvah of matzah with maisa sheni in Yerushalayim? Rabbi Akiva. This is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi Glili holds you're not yaitze with maisa sheni. This is Rabbi Akiva. And here in this braisa, Rabbi Akiva is learning it out from B'chol Moshe V'seichem and not from the comparison to Morer that Rabbi Akiva said before. So I see that Rabbi Akiva retracted the opinion that he said before, that it's because we compare it to Morer. So now Gemara goes back to what we learned in the beginning. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Teipik lei milechem oini. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, why don't you learn out from lechem oini, misha nechal ba'oini, yotza zeh she'ein nechal ela b'simcha. So why can't you learn out from here that the bikurim, just like Rabbi Yossi Aglili learned out from lechem oini that you can't eat ma'isa sheni because it's not eaten as an einon, the same thing applies to bikurim, that bikurim cannot be eaten as an einon. You could only eat it in the time when you're allowed to be b'simcha. Answers the Gemara, it's not so simple that bikurim can't be eaten as an einon. It's a machlokes. Savala Rab Shimon, Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds like Rab Shimon. The Tanya we learned in the Braise, bikurim asurin lo einon. Einon is not allowed to eat bikurim. Rab Shimon mater. Rab Shimon says an einon is allowed to eat bikurim. What's their machlokes based on? My time of the Rabbanon, dichsiv leisucha lechol b'sharecha. You shouldn't eat it b'sharecha. And that pasuk, it continues over there, and it says the pasuk, the full quote of the pasuk is, it says b'chayres b'karcha tzanecha chol nederecha v'nidveisecha, and in the end it says trumas yadecha. What is trumas yadecha? Trumas yadecha is bikurim. So therefore, v'amamar, the master said, what do we learn out from this pasuk? Trumas yadecha elu bikurim. When it says in the pasuk there, trumas yadecha, it's bikurim. The iskish bikurim lemaiser, and we compare bikurim to the maiser that it says in the beginning of that pasuk, maiser de gancha. Regarding what do we compare them? Ma maiser asel einon, just like maiser is not allowed to be eaten by an einon, av bikurim asurin la einon. Bikurim is also not allowed to be eaten by an einon. But Rab Shimon says no. Even though it says Trumas Yedecha and it means Bikurim, but Trume Karinu Rachmana, the Torah is referring to the Bikurim here with the name Trume, Ketrume, and we compare the Bikurim not to the Maisa Sheni, we compare the Bikurim to Trume. Ma Trume Muteres La Einon, and Einon is allowed to eat Trume, Af Bikurim Muter La Einon. Bikurim is also allowed to be eaten by an Einon. This is the machlokes. But now the Gemara says, l'chayre, there's another source that shows us that bikurim cannot be eaten by an einon. Rab Shimon, he the hekesh leslei. True, Rab Shimon does not hold of this comparison to Ma'aser Sheni. Simcha miyeh michtav chsivi behu. Doesn't it say clearly in the Torah that bikurim has to be eaten besimcha? The chsiv v'samachta b'chol ha'tov. By the mitzvah of bikurim, it says that you should be joyous with all the good. So that should teach you that you shouldn't be allowed to eat it when you're an einon. So how could Rav Shimon disagree with this beferish pasuk? Answers the Gemara, that pasuk is teaching me something else. Hahul is man simchudasa. That pasuk is telling me the time of when the mitzvah of bikurim applies. That now we learned in the Mishnah, meyat seres v'ada chag. From Shavuos until Sukkos, Mevi v'kaira, you bring the bikurim and you say the psukim that you bring along with the bikurim. Meaning this is the main time when you bring the bikurim. This is the time of simcha. Why is this the time of simcha? So Rashi says because that's the time when everyone cuts the wheat, the produce, the fruits, and that's when time when people are joyous with the fruits that they have. So that's the time of simcha. Now, me'achag vat Chanukah, from Sukkot until Chanukah time, maybe you can still bring your bikurim, but that's not the main time of the mitzvah. And therefore, you don't say the psukim along with what you bring. Well, after Chanukah, you can't bring it at all. From Chanukah until Shavuos, you can't bring bikurim at all. Rashi here says, because it says, Asher tovi mei artzacha, you're bringing from your land. You could only bring bikurim as long as you have the fruits still in your land. From after Chanukah, it's all gone. Whatever was left over, even the animals ate them up, so therefore you can't bring anything. So, according to Rab Shimon, when it says in the Torah, the expression of simcha regarding bikurim, it's not talking about which person should be eating it, or in what you should feel besimcha, but it's talking about the timing from Shavuos until Sukkot or until Chanukah. That's what it was talking about. But an einon is allowed to eat it. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in another brayse, going back to the matzah. Lechamayni, when it says in the pasuk lechamayni, it actually comes to exclude something else. We learned that already, many things from this pasuk. There's another thing we learn out from here. Prat lechalut. This comes to exclude chalot. Chalot is when they took the flour and they would boil the flour before they baked it. So this is something which is made to make the bread better, geschmacker, choshev bread. People that were rich would bake it this way. First cook it, boil it, and then bake it. So this is a rich man's bread. Ula shisha. La shisha, according to Rashi, means a larger bread, like a big loaf or like a big matzah. When it's made very big, very choshev, so that's not lechamayni. If so, I would think if you're telling me it's not allowed to be like a nice, good, geschmack, rich bread, so then maybe you could only be yaitz the mitzvah of matzah. Lechamayni has to be pasadra. What does pasadra mean? Only coarse flour, only inferior quality flour. Rashi says pasadra means nitl kol adara. The beauty of the bread, it shouldn't be a nice bread. Only then you're yaitz the mitzvah of matzah. Talmud loymar matzos riba. Therefore, we have again this riba. The Torah writes the lashon of matzos va'afile kem matzos shel shleima. You can make your matzah from good flour, even like the flour that was used by a person like Shlomo Melech. Imkei mat Talmud loymar lechamayni. So what do I learn out from lechamayni, which means it has to be a poor man's bread? Prat lecholot ula shisha. I only exclude these two examples of cholot, which is boiled in hot water, as I mentioned. And that's something unique. That's made specially, rich people make it this way. Ula shisha, and a very large bread, a large matzah, that is also, that's the only two things that are excluded. But otherwise, it could be again, a very good quality flour, a very good quality matzah. That's not an issue. It could be matzah that's made for Shlomo Melech. Yeah, tell this to all the matzah bakeries. It has to be good geschmack matzah. Umay mashma the haya shisha lishna the chashivusa. Where do you see that the word ashisha, what is this word ashisha, that it means that it's a big, large, nice matzah? There's a pasuk that says, Vayichalek l'chol ha'am l'chol ha'amayim Yisrael. There was a food distribution that was given out to all the Yidden. This is a pasuk in Shmuel, and there it says they gave out l'meish v'ad isha, man and woman. Leish, they gave a man chalas lechem achas, one chala ve'eshpar echad, and one eshpar, which Gemara will say in a moment what that is. Va'ashisha achas, and one ashisha. What is this that they gave out? V'amer Rav Chanan bar Abba, eshpar echad means eshpar means echad mishisha bepar, a sixth of a cow. Va'ashisha echad means echad mishisha be'efa. They gave out a sixth of an ephah. That's the size of the bread that they gave out. So that's the large. Shisha is a large bread that they gave out, a sixth of an ephah. I'm not sure what it is in today's shiurim, but this is actually brought in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe brings us to Shulchan Aruch that you shouldn't make the matzah too large for the mitzvah of matzah, because then you're not yaitz the lechamayni. Or plige the Shmuel. Now this interpretation of ashisha argues with Shmuel. Not the halacha we said it, but only this interpretation of the word ashisha. The Amma Shmuel, ashisha, the word ashisha means something else. Garba the chamra, a big cup of wine. The chsiv, there's another pasuk where it says, V'oyave ashishe anovim, and they love the cups of grapes or the cups of wine made from grapes. So it refers to a big measure of wine. Not benegay, it doesn't refer to a big measure of challah. Okay.
So Shmuel holds you to bake.
Yeah, but no. Shmuel doesn't argue. Shmuel is only arguing on the taich of ashisha. That's what the Marsha says. But in the halacha he agrees.